Hi, I'm Gandharva, and I am the Your Life Blueprint teacher and counselor. Your Life Blueprint is a holistic system that sees life as being made up as 8 separate areas, from the physical all the way up to the spiritual. There will also be 8 separate personalities that can govern each of those areas. Where you have those personalities gives you your own unique individual blueprint. So recently, it seems a lot of people have been watching the new Beatles documentary series called Get Back, myself included. I've been a big Beatles fan since I was, very young. In fact, it was the Beatles that made me want to be a musician. So I thought we could take a brief look, at the Beatles' blueprints. More specifically, their spiritual blueprints. The spiritual is the main area of life out of the 8, and the most important area of life. Pretty much defines us. So let's take a look. John Lennon was a rebel spiritually. He had the rebel personality in his spiritual area. This would give him the path of Tantra in yoga. So it would make him rebellious. It would make him unique. It would make him very different. And, saying weird things and odd things and using language in unique ways, which he definitely did, and stirring things up, shaking things up, being a free spirit, not being a follower, but being a real free-spirited leader who questioned everything, questioned authority, questioned every single thing. That was John. Paul McCartney is governed by the integrative personality spiritually. This gives him a shining, radiating spiritual path, spiritual nature, taking in everything, not discriminating, also being very independent and being a leader. He's also not a follower. Not quite as free-spirited as the rebel John Lennon, but very independent and even more of a leader, that people would look up to. And especially when their manager, Brian Epstein, died suddenly, Paul kind of took over, in a way, the leadership of the band. And it was quite natural for him to do that. George Harrison, governed spiritually by the devotional personality, which in the East would give him the path called Bhakti Yoga, the path of the heart, the path of nourishment and nurturing. This is a very quiet path, very different from Paul's. Paul's is out there shining, radiating. George is like not so independent, but more inward, more quiet, and more of a follower. And he became I think the first one interested in Eastern spirituality and gurus, and got the other Beatles interested. But he had the first interest, and not surprisingly, because he was a devotional spiritual type and looking for a teacher that he could give his devotion to. And last but not least, Ringo Starr is governed by the idealist personality, which gives him the yogic path called Raja Yoga. This is the path of positivity. This is the path of beauty. This is the path of music and art and the senses. If you watch any of that series, I mean, they all had interesting clothing that they wore at that period of time. George did, especially. But I think Ringo, too, really even more so. Ringo was the best dresser of the four, and this was due to his idealist spiritual nature and always being the positive one like that. He never said too much that was divisive in the band. He never said much at all, actually. The idealist is a lot about keeping the peace, not stirring things up. John Lennon, stirring things up. Paul, being the leader, saying what he thinks is needed at the time. George, kind of going along with everything, but on his own path. And Ringo, definitely not wanting to stir things up too much. Trying to be positive, stay positive, like that. Now, it's also interesting that they were all stressed in what I call the communicator personality. Now, none of them had the communicator personality spiritually, but John and George have had the communicator in their creative play area, and that means their creative play area was very stressed. Creative play is all about how you have fun and how you relax. It's also the area of addictions. Addictions. John and George, I would say, probably had the more serious addictive personalities. Ringo did too, because his creative play area, while not the communicator, was also stressed. So 3 very stressed creative play areas in the band, and 3 people who wound up with addictions, 2 different substances, but addictions nonetheless. Paul seemed to have escaped that for the most part. I think because he has a strong creative play area. Anyway, getting back to the communicator though. John and George communicator stressed in creative play. Paul's communicator is in relationships and is stressed. So sometimes over accommodating, I think, would be a good word for Paul. The communicator can be flexible and adaptable and mold itself to its surroundings and everything. But if it's stressed, it's probably going to do that too much. So Paul can figure out what people need from him, and he can, in a way, be that with other people, but he can mold himself a little too much around other people. And then that makes his whole relationship area stressful. And then Ringo had the communicator in emotions, and this was also stressed for him. So interesting that all 4 of them had stressed communicator personalities. I would say out of the 4, Ringo and Paul were the most stressed, had the most stress areas. Paul's stress areas are relationships, career, Dharma, which is life purpose. Dharma and emotions are one area, so emotional too. And vital body, which is mental stress area, basically. So he's stressed in all 4 of those areas. Ringo is stressed in career. And that's interesting because he has the lonering career. And after the Beatles broke up, his career just pretty much went down the toilet. Or for a while, he became an 18-inch train conductor on television. That was kind of a low point for him. And it wasn't until he got older that he became popular again with his all-star band, and that's because the loner manifests more strongly later in life. So not surprising, he's a little bit of a late bloomer in career, even though he had some early success, obviously, with the Beatles. He's also stressed in creative play, as I said. He's stressed in emotions and dharma, and he's stressed in his vital body. John was basically just stressed in creative play, a little bit in desires too. And then George was stressed in creative play and dharma and emotions. So there you go. A brief look at the 4 Beatles, spiritual blueprints, and some other little things.